Hello, good morning. Welcome to Savannah Voices of the Festival. And now we're back. We had trouble connecting with Pei Wen, and hopefully we figure out a way that she will be able to connect. It could be that she doesn't have enough connection where she is, so perhaps it doesn't work. But we're going to let Kiani come in. And she's a pro, so she knows how to get in. And now I'm going to ask also Pei Wen, and I'm inviting her, and I see that she's watching. So now they have to click on the little circle, and there you are.
Hi.
How you doing?
Good, good.
Sorry about that. I mean, we had a little waiting moment. So let's see if she's able to watch us, and it will be great if she can. The goal, one of we certainly wanted to chat and find out what you guys were doing, and you were tell us about the beautiful concert that you did in Fort Lauderdale recently, so that's great. And when she's watching a list, yay. And to join, and I know that Pei Wen is watching. Hi, Pei Wen, but she's unable to join. I think Pei Wen, you really need to connect with Wi-Fi, and you can text me if you can connect with Wi-Fi. If not, we will not be able to see you. Okay, I think the problem is that there's not enough connection for you to support the video. Okay, so Pei Wen, try to get. I know that you're watching. Try to get into some kind of Wi-Fi, and then text me if that's possible. If not, we'll do it some other time. Kiani! So one of the reasons that we're doing this is just to find out what we're doing, but also we want to chat about how do we learn music.
Yeah.
But not just for those that learn music. It's just also for the people that don't learn music, like for the audience that say, how do you go by learning a whole opera, right? So because once you get to it, we don't think about how the process happens, or how do we get there. We just get that, assume that everyone speaks all kind of languages known to man, and you can get on stage and suddenly, like in the cartoon, that the conductor does that, and so that you know exactly what is supposed to say, and the right tempos and the right pitches, and you just get inspired, and then so then you get the melody, and then the choreography suddenly happens because everyone is right. So no,
I wish that
is not how it happens. It's first of all, in opera, there is, to begin with, a score, meaning that everything is indicated. Not everything actually, but the sound is going to. Oh yes, it was request. Yeah. Oh yeah. I think she requested. She was able to make a request, and she might be. There you are! Yeah.
I tried everything. Sorry, everybody.
You made it.
Oh my God.
That's good.
Everyone. Good to see you.
Yeah, nice to see you too. I'm glad that you made it. Yeah, that's perfect.
All right. Sorry.
Yeah, that is good. We were just talking that how do we learn music, and like in the movies, suddenly it feels like magically people know exactly what to say, and everyone speaks many languages, and then you get inspired, and everyone knows exactly how to sing in the same harmony and dance the same choreography, and it's just a matter of you just go, or like for example, you just tell the band, oh yeah, just follow me, and then everyone knows the harmony and the tempos, and then no. So no, that is not how it works. There's a score, and the score tell us what to say in terms of the text, and how to say in terms of the music and the dynamics and the harmonies, and the orchestra also have a score, and everyone is reading the same score that indicates what to do all the time. And the score is in classical music is very, very important, in the sense it's essential. And we are in a way, there's a bit of an known fact, or like or better, how you say it, like an agreement in that we try to follow the score as much as possible, right? And of course there are these other that nowadays we are doing the investigation to get the best score possible and to get the most accurate version that the composer did, although we do a lot of cuts and that throws everything, but anyway, so the score is very important. The score tells us what to do and how to do everything. The score does indicates a bit of the staging, but often directors disregard the writing that is in the score, and they do their own physical interpretation of the score. And one thing that I said about the score, in the simple explanation, is that the conductor deals with everything that sounds, and the director does everything that looks. So if you were to hear a soundtrack of a performance, all those choices were made by the conductor and the artist, of course. And if you went to see a video with a mute, everything that you see is the director with the performance, obviously. So, but the idea is how do we go by learning a score? And Pei Wen, how would you recommend to start and to a singer that is saying, okay, so I need to learn Susanna in a week? No, that is not happening. But let's say I need to learn a role from Don Giovanni, Zarlina. What do I do first?
First, I think is to find all your parts and look really carefully, especially in ensemble. Sometimes you have just 1-2 bars in a big ensemble, so try to find everything and mark them. And with your own judgment to see over everything, which part do you think vocally would need more time to learn, right? So because your voice the best. Then after that, of course, go one line at a time. If you have the luxury of period of time, you can do. If not, I will actually just read the text first and really understand what it's about. And with all the masterpieces we are learning, usually the composer is helping us how to learn in terms of the language and everything else. So I would just go from that first.
Great.
But we have to know the rhythm and everything.
And since we often do pieces in a foreign language, one of the main things that we had to do when we read the text is get a translation. How do you deal with foreign languages, Kiani, in terms of learning a piece?
So when for foreign, for me, I try. Well, in the beginning, I would just listen to the music and try to get it in my head. And then we have this thing called IPA, which was a content. But as I got older, I realized I had to learn music a little bit more quickly. So audio still works for me, but I actually have to physically write it out. So I have a system, flashcards. It's like a thing for me. And what I do, so I'm using Daughter of the Regiment for an example. Y'all can't really see it, but I actually put the text of everything that I sing and I speak, and I have the IPA at the top. And then
wait. What is IPA? What do you mean IPA? What is that?
International Phonetic Alphabet. This is how you say words.
And what is that? What's the International Phonetic Alphabet?
It's that I just call it IPA. This is basically just like if you that's the only way I can really like describe it is basically like you trying to literally sound out a word. So this is what the symbol looks like on top of the language that you're learning. And that's kind of how I figured it out. And then when you turn the card over, it has the meaning on the back of it, the actual English translation. But I've gotten a little, and then okay, then after I do that to memorize, I have a notebook. So I literally write out my text in a notebook repetitively. And this is about a month's worth of work. And but I've become a little bit more better at learning the language more because I decided to download the app Duolingo so I can actually understand how to speak the language and pronounce it like correctly. Obviously, it's going to change when you're singing because of modification and whatnot. But once you actually understand how the flow of the language works, and then you get the sound of the language in your ear, it starts to become a little bit more like second nature. This is just my system and how I do it. But how I put the in the score, I had everything prepared. So we're going to just jump over to Italian. So this is L'Elise d'Amore. And I took this from Lisette Oropesa. Don't hate me, Lisette. So I actually tab my axe at the top. This is actually a better system because she figured it out and I loved it. I tab my axe at the top, and on the side, I tab all of my entrance. This is the best system I've ever come up with. But when you're dealing with the score, like say, I can't pull it out, but let's just say Così fan tutte because that was a nightmare. Because Despina is in every single scene, so it's not gonna work. I actually use a combination of tabbing and paper clips, and I have color paper clips. So anytime I have a cut, the bigger paper clips are the cuts that from that page to the next page, and then the smaller paper clips in color are all of my entrances. And then my tabs are all my arias and ensembles. So if you're doing with the Mozart score like that, like a Don Giovanni alle Nozze or a Così, not so much Magic Flute because it's a short little opera, that's the system I use. And when you open the score on the inside, I did oh I actually put not that I actually put translation at the top of my line. So what I used to do back in college was that I used to put the IPA at the top, the pronunciations of each word at the top. That started to mess up my peripheral vision. So I was like, I can't do that anymore. So once I got used to actually learning how to speak the language properly, learning a score like this got a lot easier. So I don't have to worry about all of this mess. So that's my system of learning music.
Great. I'm going to talk a bit about the IPA, the International Phonetical Alphabet. What it is that it creates a symbol, a letter for each sound of phoneme. So in all our Occidental languages, we do have letters for sounds, and eventually, because we're using the language that was created for Latin, there's a lot of sounds that are not in Latin. So even Romance languages had to create a way to indicate certain sounds. For example, in Spanish, the sound of ch doesn't exist in the Latin, so you had to use two letters, the C and the H. But the phonetic alphabet created a way to make that sound into one letter, although the ch is also two letters. It's a T and the ch, and it has a sound, a different letter for different sounds. For example, French have I think 12 vowels, vowel sounds. So each of those vowels, although it's spelled with one letter and an accent or two letters, the phonetic alphabet creates one letter for those sounds. So you know which one are we talking about. So if it's going to be a schwa, it has its own letter. And if it's going to be open it has its own letter. So that's what the phonetic alphabet give us, is that a rewriting of the text with the focus on how it sounds, not at all how it's spelled.
Right.
Some languages are more phonetic, meaning that they're closer to the writing is closer to the pronunciation. Originally, for example, classical Greek was absolutely phonetic, and every sound has its own letter. And like, for example, they have the letter for closed E and the letter for closed E. From closed A and from open A, they had a letter for E, for E, and for U. Because they created the language. So they created the language, so they created a sign for every letter. But after that, because most languages borrow someone else's writing, either Greek, Cyrillic, or well, Cyrillic is a way of Greek, or Latin. So they had to figure out how to write those things in a way. I would say that Hebrew is a bit phonetic, but it's now with the indication of the letters, it is. So each sound has its own letter. Anyway, so we have this phonetic alphabet that for non-singers, it's a new thing. But for us people dealing with vocal music, we use it all the time. And the first thing that you do to learn it is you get a translation. And nowadays, most of standard repertoire have the translation already done, so you can find it somehow. A good friend of ours, Nico Castell, was an amazing teacher at Juilliard of Diction and a fantastic tenor. And he was a colleague with us in Israel in its program similar to Voice Experience. And Nico published a huge collection of operas with the translation and the IPA. So that is a great time saver. It has all these famous operas, for example, all the operas by Puccini, all the operas by Donizetti, Bellini, many operas by Rossini, all the operas by Mozart, all the operas by Strauss, all the operas by Wagner, all the operas by Verdi. So all those and many other, all those books are ready. So if you're doing some of what we call the standard repertoire in foreign language, you will have the life-saving or the time-saving opportunity to use these books. And it gives you a lot of insights, but certainly give you the translation and the phonetic alphabet writing. So, and it's up to you if you write it in the score or not. And as Kenny said, sometimes the scores get a little too busy, so it's better to keep it separate. And it depends how level of experience you have. If you need to know every word, or just eventually you just only write the words that you don't know, but you know most of them, right? How will you how will you say if you do it? Someone is doing a opera in a one of the unusual languages that the opera that lets you Czech or Russian or Spanish. How do you go to what you approach with the translation?
These days, most of the Russian operas you can find the translations. That's in terms of Czech. Recently, a girl, she just found a Czech. I'm in New York, so you can find all nationalities in the city, especially if you're in the school. So she just asked a favor of a Czech person to record the specific aria for her, and it seems to me that's the go-to, most authentic if you can find the opportunity. Or I think the Duolingo, you can ask somebody to read for you or something like that, as I heard before. So that's all possible, I think.
Great. Yeah, that's a good way of reaching. If you don't have, if you don't speak the language, find someone that speaks the language, and it will tell it to you. And of course, so as we know, and Kenny said, singing is not the same as talking. So there's a bit of a difference and a modification, but we are already dealing with a much more sophisticated issue. There's a problem of, well, you will say like this, but you sing it like that, and which is a little close, but not exactly the same.
Yeah.
One thing that Kenny, you mentioned, and I think it's very useful and important, is the opportunity of listen to the music. I to be honest, when I have a new piece, I will definitely listen to recordings, and of course I listen to several recordings, so I don't have one version in mind, but so by now I'm able to listen but not copy, or well, or copy if I like it, why not? But not necessary. It's not I mean, then I go to the score and I do my own judgment. How do you deal with recordings, Kenny?
So I pretty much do the same thing you just mentioned about how I listen to different recordings, specifically when you're dealing with an opera, popular like Così fan tutte. You're gonna find multiple recordings of that. There isn't to me there isn't a perfect cast, but I try to go towards the one that has a voice similar
Uh-huh.
to different um singers, selection of how they design and whatnot. And once I get a general sense of the style of the opera, then I go away and I actually start trying to learn the things. So, and it always starts with the text first. I used to, again, the way how I used to learn in college was I learned the notes first before I learned the language. I switched that in grad school, so I had to get my mind around that. But I have found that audio learning for me actually really works really well because it gets the melody in my head. I'd be like, oh, I remember how this tone goes. Great. Now I can learn the text to the darn thing. So yeah, that's kind of how I do it. Now, when it comes down to art songs, it's a little different. Particularly when you're learning new stuff. Paywin and I can talk about that. But going to general standard repertoire of the art songs, there are tons of recordings of different artists and even unknown and famous artists doing these the standard rep, and it's the same process for me where I listen to it to say, oh, this is how Dinah Damorow did it, and that's really wonderful. Or, oh, this is how Kiri Takanawa did it. She didn't take a breath there, you know. So you just get different ideas and whatnot, and then you apply that to your practicing. Can I do that in one line? Why is it that she didn't take a breath here? Oh, I see. Start to just play around with it, and then afterwards you come out and you go to your coach or your pianist, start playing with it to see, you know, what are the possibilities of doing X, Y, and Z. And yeah, that's how I go about it.
And so you said that you go to a coach or a pianist and you work with someone. What's the point of working with the coach or the pianist at that time? What is the kind of work that you do with them?
So with a coach, for me, always supposed to like when I work with a specific coach, like take Karen Levine. She helps me with the language, she helps me with the style, and she helps me with a little bit of vocal insight in terms of like I wouldn't take a breath there if I were you, you know, be careful with that. Or if it is a question like why are you doing that, take it to your voice teacher and let's have a discussion. If it's just a pianist in general, like if you just want to get a sense of you actually finally singing it for yourself, not you singing along with the recording. My neighbor's cutting his grass. Give me 1 second.
Yeah, okay, sure. Uh, all right, and so wait, and when you work with singers and they are learning the piece with you, Sam, what's what will be the process that you will do in terms of assessment and how you make it, how you help them?
Well, the first thing these days I find we don't have the rhythm structure down because we learn the melody, and of course, as a singer musician, go to the melody first. That's I absolutely understand. But just in terms of not even just for opera, for songs, we have to absolutely figure out what's the rhythm interpretation because we need to. Why is composer writing especially 2 beats plus tie over a quarter, for example? So if we only sing that note for a quarter, then we don't serve the purpose of the composer. So for me, that's very important. And the next, of course, in terms of language, we have been talking this morning. I hear about all the pronunciations. But another thing I find these days, once we know how to pronounce, we have to listen to the intonation of certain language we are singing with. So it's not just pronounced like this, right? So with the help of great music, find out what is inside. How do we actually speak this particular sentence with the music? And I think that's we need to go the next step, not just how to pronounce the word. Because after all, even if we pronounce correctly every syllable, it still doesn't sound the language. So I think a lot of our listeners, they can go to this next level. That will be my two.
How do you relate the learning of the score on the flow of the language? How do you put together the language and the score in terms of flow?
So first of all, read phrase by phrase. And of course, like we say, if you listen to a recording, listen to how people shape. After no, nobody learns like first thing when you just start to learn how to sing, you don't learn the whole score. So you certainly come to certain experiences that you can learn. Okay, I'm ready to learn one act. And then next time you can learn two acts. Eventually you say, I can learn a score. So after certain foundation of your study, you should hear when you listen to somebody singing, you should hear how people actually phrasing it with language together, because I truly believe music and language should be one thing. But these days, very often we just go for pronunciation and we try to pronounce the right word at right time and with the right note. So still not part of your, you know, inside. So that's, I will go from that.
Right. And it's you made me think that, right. So we eventually we have an experience of how the language work and how the language function, but that takes a while to get familiar with the languages, and that's why it's a little more comfortable these days. I mean, sometimes you just do it in the four famous the languages that we do the most, but which are German, Italian, French, and English. Those are the ones that take, I would say, over 90% of the repertoire that we do typically. Um, and because if I had to deal with a piece in other language, either the second more popular, well, of course Spanish is easy for me, but Russian or Czech, and but if I had to do something even more unusual, in fact, I just did, and I was producing an opera in Guarani, and that's, I mean, that was not. If I had to learn that, it would have been taking me 3 times or 4 times the amount of time of learning that same piece in Spanish, because I had to go back to the basics that with other languages are not. So and also, Kiani, you told us that of course earlier your process was longer, but now it gets faster and faster. How do you do if you had to do? What's the last time you learned something in a non in one of the typical languages?
Oh, the last thing I did was Italian with Christina.
No, I understand, but in non-typical language, like not in Italian, not in French, not in German, not in English. Have you done anything in Czech or Russian or even other languages like Turkish or Armenian or Japanese?
I mean, well, does Japanese? Well, it wouldn't be in standard repertoire. That's just listening to a lot of anime, but that doesn't count. Um, I mean, I won't go there. But at my church, we had to learn a Ukrainian piece. Um, it was the Ukrainian, I think, is it their national anthem? The
Okay.
ba da dee da da dum ba da da da. I think it's their national anthem. Um, in response to the war in Ukraine, so we're honored to sing that song, and we're all going, wow, how do we learn this piece? Thankfully, we have a choir member who actually is from Ukraine and helped us out tremendously. So, it's I saw that the pronunciation, the phonetic pronunciation was very much like the Russian pronunciation. So the learning of it wasn't so hard. But when we got a chance to listen to him speak it, I could hear the inflections. Like I had to actually like do this a little bit because I was just like, okay, slow down. Say that word one more time. Like where is, and when you look at the when you look at the phonetic pronunciation, it's like a mess. It literally is a mess. But once you understand what those like three little syllables couple as, it's bizarre. It to me, it's like all of those syllables. It's like three syllables in one, literally. And but once I understood how the flow of the language went, I said, "Oh, it's not so bad. Like I have sung Russian before, so it's very similar." And yeah, it we learned a week. And it came really good. So it was good to have that kind of a resource to have somebody from the actual country there in the United States actually saying, this is how we do things. So, and after we sang it, he was like, oh, your pronunciation is really good. It's like, because we were professionals.
Right, right. I mean,
Yeah.
and we eventually we have an ear for languages, and we know what to listen to.
Hmm.
Of course, sometimes we don't know what we listen because there's some sounds that are not in our vocabulary at all. So those ones we don't even hear.
Right.
It has, in my experience, when I try to uh, say certain names in for example in Chinese, but when there's sounds that I don't hear the difference. I mean, I cannot hear when you put them side by side, but there's a specificity that sometimes we're not used to, and we need to really learn how to imitate. As we know, languages are essentially an imitation thing. We learn languages by imitating. When we were a kid, we just imitate, and then by corrections or failing, or that's how we learn languages, and then eventually we have a facility for it, and it's great when for kids. I always encourage parents to teach them many languages if possible in a home, at home. If there are parents that speak different language, I tell them you should try to talk to them in all those languages, because the earliest we get our brain cells trained to hear certain sounds, the better in the future will be for that person, right? So yes.
I have to leave for rehearsal, but in
Right.
terms of learning Chinese, I think this is the place that you should just learn the pronunciation with our four sounds. You will go with music because we always have the great guidance from great composers. So
Right.
if the heavier four sounds in Chinese usually is a lower note, or we can be a little bit louder. You know, this insight I can give you,
Great.
but this is really a different system than what we were thinking in Italian or something like that.
Right. Right. Do you IPA Chinese?
No, at least I've never tried. We have our own IPA for pronunciation, but that's not the same. Like you spell out like the normal IPA.
Right. Right.
Interesting.
Yeah,
Definitely. Great. Well, thank you, Pei Wen, and thank you for
but,
joining us. I'm
but
glad we got it, and was fun to do it. Have a good rehearsal.
thank you so much.
Bye, Pei Wen.
Huh?
And Kenny, we can say a little longer since we started a little later, but just now. So we talk about translation and the flow of the languages, and then we kind of go into the music. And how do you deal with rhythm? I mean, the two big elements of music are rhythm and pitches.
Hmm.
And of course, then we have articulations, dynamics, and everything else. What's the process not typically for you?
Um, for rhythm and pitches, they're kind of like for me, it's like one and the same. And because after I've listened to the whole opera or art song, I go into a practice room and I have the music in front of me and I start plucking out the notes. But this is where I have to be specific on what I'm learning. So if I take a score, for example, um, my arias, the last thing I learn. because they're the easiest thing to learn, unless it's a really demanding aria. Then I'm like, okay, you gotta put you towards the front because you. I try to go towards the ensembles first, um, and figure out what is the toughest ensemble to learn. So let's take Così fan tutte, for example. I had to learn the last ensemble first in Act Two, even though we had a lot of cuts, but the big finale at the end, because for some reason that finale would not stick in my head for the life of me. Like I don't know how many hours I spent on that thing. There was something about it that was easy but unusual, because I was like, I don't know where Mozart's going. I mean, I do, but I don't. It's bizarre. So I literally, in every rehearsal I would say, okay, we're gonna start with you first, then I'm gonna step away and I'm gonna learn something else. I would work backwards. And that's another thing I picked up from Lisa Oropesa. I learned the score backwards, which is actually memorization wise, it actually sticks to you. And if that's not enough, I also learn the ensembles, arias, duets backwards as well. And if you want to go a step further, I'll skip over to Zerbinetta's aria. This is completely different. We're in German and it's Strauss. In her third little section, which is the fast section, the let's da 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 da. There's a phrase that if you learn it forwards, you're not know. And I remember listening to Edita Gruberova's recording, and I was like, okay, that's the rhythm. Ba-dee-da, ba-da-da-da-dee-da, da-da-da-da. I looked back and I said, I don't know if she got all those notes right, but out of all the recordings I've listened to, I think she was the only one next to Riri Grist who actually sang the notes correctly. So I had to take that phrase specifically, bracket it off, and learn that whole entire phrase backwards. Like literally
Hmm.
starting and building upon that until I got back to the beginning of the phrase, and then I actually sang it several times until I got it. So therefore, I have the notes correctly in there. So and it's a process. This is the point where it takes a lot of time and it takes a lot of patience, because my tendency is to learn things fast, but that's where you make a lot of mistakes. And when you go into your coachings and your rehearsals, then you time don't want to do that. I mean, I can understand when you do make, mistakes and it's like, okay, I my brain just flubbed. But when you're making it constantly, you're like, okay, you learned that wrong. You really need to go back and fix that. So in my practice time, I have to really, really tell myself, slow down, just take your time learning this phrase and make sure you get all of the notes correctly. And then if you still have like a sense that something is not right, go back to the recording and double check to make sure that that's the correct rhythm. And then I also ask my coach to make sure that I'm singing it correctly or is that the right rhythm. And they do put me in check because sometimes I be guessing as well. So yeah.
And opera, most of the time you're singing with some other people.
Mhm.
How do you learn that element? I mean, you're certainly doing duets, but also you're doing sextets and septet, and oops, sorry. In the case of Così, it's a sextet, the most you have because it's only six people. So how do you go by learning a piece that not only has a lot of interaction, but actually that you are in the middle of it?
Trying to isolate my part once again, and learning it backwards. And with Cozy, it wasn't incredibly difficult to learn the sextet, because like a lot of those parts aren't as intricate, at least to my ear. I can't really think of an example that was just a complete chaos where you really can't hear your part, but there are some in the. This is where I think you have to. I mean, I've listened to recordings to see if my part was even like, audible. Sometimes it's not, and this is where I would actually ask for help. I would ask phone a friend and be like, "Hey, can you play out my part for me just to make sure that I'm not doing this incorrectly?" I will actually attempt to get on the piano and be like, "Yeah, you did da 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 da." I think, and if I have a trouble spot, I will mark it in red, and then I will go to that pianist and say, "Hey, can I just try this out with you just to make sure?" This is before I even go. Sometimes I'll go to my coach. Other times, if my coach is not available, I'll go to a friend, and we'll go through it. And they say, that's great, that's correct. Nah, nope, 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 nope. This is actually what it sounds like. And then we will actually just sing my part by myself just to make sure that's correct. And other times they will play the other person's part while I'm against it. So I make sure that I'm not, I'm not singing any wrong notes. So I actually hear it. So when I get in a room full of people, I was like, yeah, I'm ready now. I got this. I know your part, I know your part, and I know your part plus mine. So yeah, it really,
And
that's a
you mentioned when, for example, when you work with Karen Levine, beautiful coach from currently at the Met. She's one of the prompters at the Met, and she lived in Miami for a long time. Or I don't know if she's still doing both places. But you mentioned you should take this to your teacher, to your voice teacher. So what's the difference between a vocal coach, and a voice teacher?
vocal coach. This has been like a gray line for me for a while. For me, a voice teacher is supposed to teach technique and understanding how the voice mechanism works so you actually have that. A vocal coach, this is just my definition, to me teaches style and gives you more of an insight of what um the stylistic of the composer and of this is how things are done traditionally, whatnot. So I get kind of both worlds, sometimes from Karen, sometimes from my voice teacher. I'll get more of the technical aspects from my voice teacher, but sometimes because she'll have sung some of the same, not all of the rep, but some rep that she and I have together, and she'll be like, "No, this is Puccini. You got to do it like this. This is what it's called for, and everything." And I'll also get reinforced by Karen saying, "Like, yep, you got to do it like this. This is where you're going for. You can't be like this." Or if she doesn't know anything, if she isn't familiar with the bel canto, I'm talking about my voice teacher now. If she's not familiar, I'm just throwing this example. I will go to Karen and I'll be like, okay, so what is the style of bel canto? What am I looking for? And she will tell me like, this is what it is. This is what you're going for. And she'll give me embellishments and whatnot. And I'll take it back to my voice teacher and say, hey, let me try this out to see if this works. Great. That's awesome. Let me just fix some things technically so it'll be easier for you. And that's how those two work together.
All right, so you're getting a lot of information uh, in the process. Have you worked with Diction Coach, specifically Diction coaches?
Worked with the diction coach I worked with was Hemdi Kafir at IVAI, and that was back in 2017. It was a long time ago. And we just sat down and we had to actually speak the text. And that was an eye-opening for me because she's a prodigy of Nico Castel, and she really opened my eyes to a lot of the nuances of the language and how it's supposed to be pronounced, the inflections, and and a little bit of like some stories behind all of that stuff, which I think was really, really cool. I haven't coached with her in a while, and I would love to. So
What piece were you doing with Hemdi?
it was Serpina Tesaria.
Oh, all
Mhm.
right.
Yeah, yeah, it was
That's
fun.
it. Talking about Nico, there's an amazing video of his doing the Haushofmeister speech from Ariadne of Naxos.
Mhm.
You should look for it. It's just
Yeah.
hilarious, hilarious. Great. So we arrived to the music, and we learned the music, the pitches, and the dynamics, and how do you deal with articulation in pieces more advanced like Massenet or Puccini?
Oof. I think that goes back to listening again. Uh,
Okay.
I'm trying to find an example. Ah, I did when Opera Fusion was still in operation, and we did an emerging artists program concert back in I think 2020, somewhere in 20, I think. I might be wrong, but to do Mimi for it, and it was just for a learning tool because it was going to teach me something later on. And this was difficult because I was like, okay, I've never touched Mimi before. I'm more of a I like musetta better, um, but I wanted to try it out because it was a challenge. So
Yeah.
And
Sorry, I lost that one. What is it?
Sorry, it's ah, I
Okay.
um I asked myself the question, who is the best Mimi out there? Like who actually really captured the essence of Mimi? That was Manuela Freni. And I listened to her recording with Luciano Pavarotti, and I needed to understand exactly, did she follow what Puccini wrote? And she did. And I understood the dynamics, I understood the phrasing, and but I actually underestimated it a little bit because I came in and yeah, that was hard. And was it my voice teacher or was it someone else? But whoever I went in, I took it to before the concert. I realized I had to give more to this particular piece, and once I did, then I was like, okay, now I know how to approach this. Now I understand why he put the dynamics over here because of this word, and now I understand why the harmonies are here because this is what is happening, and I really stuck close. This was one of those instances I really stuck closely to what Franny did and really paid attention to what the composer wrote. And it made it exciting. That's something that I didn't really get in conservatory. I think because we were so focused in conservatory, you're just so focused on actually just, trying to sing well and just
Right.
pass your classes. But once you get out of that and you actually have the freedom to really dive into those details, it becomes alive. It really is exciting. And then there is a sense of freedom in that. I don't know. It's weird. If you agree with that?
Yeah. Yeah. That's um well, I think we advance in how we learn the score and how we read the score. And one thing that I was telling you that I'm big is in not do what's in the score, but do why is in the score. So do the score as a result of the creative process that make the composer and the librettist arrive to that place. How do we build the dramatic and the situation of the character living and thinking and feeling through the tools that we have, which are text and music, and so then and articulation and harmonies and melody and all those elements that create the character. So of course we do what's written, but we try to figure out what's the point of that dramatic moment. And so we go to the score and we said, why was it written that way? Why C major? Why allegro? Why staccato? Why the grace note? So all that makes you read the score in a very motivating way.
Right. I agree.
And and how do you do with the new pieces? You have done several new pieces that don't have recordings, and the score may be done by someone that is comfortable with vocal music or people that don't do vocal music often, and so how is it? Is it any difference?
Um, so the music the new music I've done so far has all been in English. So
Mhm.
so that made the process a lot easier.
Right.
But um I will say that MIDI files were a godsend. I had so the Secret River, which I spoke about in the last live that I did, was something that was completely new. We were creating this literally on the spot. Did like kind of like a workshop version of it first, and I learned from the MIDI files, but then I had to go away and actually go on the piano and figure out exactly what Stella Sung was trying to put together. And in this particular instance, she actually was listening to us to see, okay, she does that a lot. I need to make sure that that works for her. Like, and then I'm glad we had input with the lyricist and the composer and another voice. Um, oh gosh, I don't even know what the name is, but somebody who knows the voice very, very well and saying like, well, it would be best if you just don't do that because you won't be able to breathe and you should make this more of a line and everything. So this type of input really allowed us to shape what the opera was going to become. And So that was that collaboration. And then after we did the workshop, a lot of that changed. So by the time we got the final print, then we were like, oh, a lot of our ideas actually came on the paper. So I thought that was really, really cool. And the same thing happened with the other world premiere that I did in Washington, D.C., where again, we had a MIDI file. But I went away and I went back to the piano and I was like, okay, I'm plucking out these notes to make sure this is right. The difference with this one is that the style changed. So you had a mixture of jazz and opera and a little bit of pop in this show. And so we tried out a lot of cool stuff. So it wasn't like, big broad lines and you're singing your heart out. It was more like, that kind of
Mm-hmm.
thing. It took the pressure off a little bit. But when I went to Savannah now, coming to you guys, um, when you guys gave me two beautiful pieces by Jody Gulpy, and I again MIDI file, but thankfully I brought my piano with me, so I was like, okay, I think I know what I want to do. And then I actually saw what she wanted. She was very specific with her writing, and Ghost became a favorite of the
All
two.
right.
Really
Great.
like Ghost. I think it's because Ghost had those soaring lines, so that's
Yeah.
probably my favorite.
Yeah.
But I love the text in WTH. I
Great.
mean, the process is still the same, except you just eliminate the whole take so much time with the language because it's English. Um, that I mean, that's how I came to be. And Pei Wen was also a godsend. She and we really worked as much as we could together. I asked if I can have extra time on this because I really wanted it to be well. Um, to really pull out what the composer wanted in those two pieces, and figure out what are the emotional drives behind it, where are places where we can take time, where are places we can speed up, where are places we can be extremely still, and when we check rhythm and pitches too, because those are some of those issues as well.
Right.
But to have that collaboration, and it came out extremely well. Yeah.
Great. Excellent. Good. Well, thank you, Kenny, for joining us. It was really fun, and it was, and I'm glad that we get to do it also with Pei Wen, and thank you for giving us your eyes, your insights, and how you learn music. You learn a lot of it, the new and old. So it's fun to, and I think not just, I mean, for those ones that are learning, but also the ones that are not learning, just to know what do we do and what is a better idea of what's involved in the process of learning new music. All right. Thank you. And I will talk to you around. I will see you in November.
Yep. See you in
All
November.
right. Bye. Bye, everyone. I will see you in 2 weeks at Voices of the Festival. Okay. See you soon. Bye.